It doesn't happen all that often, but there have been instances where Street Fighter characters are banned from tournaments over the years. By our account, this has happened about 3.5 times. The most obvious reason for this is because a character will be overpowered, but that's not the only reason a ban can happen. We'll find out more about it on this week's episode of Talkin' Block. Hello, we are talking about the banned characters of Street Fighter this week, but before we do that, we are closing in on our goal of having 1 million subscribers. We're at about 8,900 and something right now, so if you guys could help us get to that goal of 1 million, go ahead and Psycho Crush the like button, give us a subscribe, and we're going to talk, like I said, about banned characters. There aren't as many as you might think over the history of Street Fighter. As I count, and it was kind of hazy, and I'm sure that there have been instances where communities are like, I don't understand Rufus, so he's banned in Street Fighter 4 or something along those lines. This is not that. This is like not necessarily community-wide, but major swaths of the community agreeing that a character was not viable for a tournament. And as I count, there's about 3.5 of them. I came down at 3.5 banned characters in Street Fighter history. And I guess we can jump right into it. I'll go with the most obvious one. I think the most people know about this one. This is Akuma in Street Fighter 2, specifically Street Fighter 2 Super Turbo. And he was a hidden character that people get a blast back to the past, because it's important to understand that this was a different time. A lot of what we're going to see here in this discussion about why a character would be banned is sort of not a thing anymore, antiquated. And now the most obvious here is that the character would be just too powerful and thus become something of a black hole on the character select screen where the whole rest of the game doesn't matter, because if you pick this character, they're going to be so much more better, to quote Jack Sparrow, much more better than everyone else, and he was designed to be God mode. And John, you kind of went through this, so I have a list of things that I could talk about. I think the biggest thing was his air fireball was a good place to start, but you lived through this. Tell me about Akuma and why he was so broken in ST.
Mostly the air fireball, because the game was not designed around characters being able to counter that. Like there was basically no counter for it. It was like the Akuma tradition is like having it be like plus 1 billion on hit or block, and if you could kind of get the air fireball out there and set it up and do it, it just basically destroyed most of the cast members. Like I don't even know if Zangief had a counter to it at all. You know, like he had Green Hand in that game, but like that did not cover the air. So the characters just weren't designed around countering it. He was basically God mode, as you said. Almost entirely broken. The damage, that everything he did was ridiculous. Yes. And so it's
they just take the frame data, which a lot of us are familiar with now. Well, not so much back in the day. That was not commonly known, information. It wasn't just out there. But you basically tweak it all up. His recovery is, I think he could lock you down with red fireballs because the startup was so quick and his recovery was so quick, but it would still lock you into block stun. So if he was close enough to the corner, I think he could just lock you down with red fireballs and such. He had demon setups where you could not escape them at all. Like you'd get into a block stun. I think it was like after roundhouse, and then if you did demon, you didn't have time to escape it. He would just basically block combo you into demon. So it was just goofy, and he had special juggles. David Serlin, who was the head designer of HD Remix and very much a Street Fighter 2 player, his quote here, it says, regarding Akuma, he's not just the best. He's miles and miles and miles above the rest of the cast. He was never intended to be fairly balanced in ST, and it shows. So he was actually, Serlin was like I said, the lead designer on HD Remix, really spent time trying to, quote unquote, make Akuma the 17th character, because he was just, as I said, he was banned. You couldn't play as him for obvious reasons. And they did so much to him, and he says, we made him way, way weaker in all caps. And yet it was very quickly discovered that even in HD Remix, when Akuma was significantly tuned down, there were still issues. Damdai was famous for discovering those pretty quickly and going on a tear when that game was in, like kind of competitive circulation shortly after it came out. And he still had an air fireball trap where even if you blocked the air fireball, he could go into demon. And 25% of the time you could jump out, but 75% of the time you were just getting demoned for blocking an air fireball. Now, by today's standards, we live in this time where where developers can go in an emergency patch, and even if there is something that's kind of egregious, well, you're only waiting a few months for things to get updated, and that's going to go away. It's just a very different time. So,
Cammy Street Fighter V players are looking at that character and going, I don't see a problem. It's fine.
All right, it took all of 6 minutes for Cammy to come up. All right, and Cammy was one of the worst in ST, right? She's one of the worst characters there.
Yeah, she's like she might be the hands down worst actually.
Different times. Yeah. Okay, so now we jump to our next character. Is a similar story to Akuma in Super Turbo and HD Remix, but this is Gil in Street Fighter 3. Again, literally like a god character, a boss character that was not intended to be playable, not intended to be competitive. And indeed, he wasn't, as far as I understand it, available to play in the arcades initially. But Third Strike was such a successful game in the competitive realm that when Street Fighter 4 sort of brought things back for the fighting game community, we entered that kind of golden age. Street Fighter 3 was brought back too and ported to home consoles. It was, there's Street Fighter 3 or Third Strike Online, and then more recently we got the 30th anniversary collection. You can play Third Strike there.
Yeah, it was in the Street Fighter 3 was on the 25th anniversary, which had Third Strike and then Hyper Street Fighter. So before Street Fighter 4, actually, and that's what most people are playing on, like the original Xbox console, and then I guess PS2. And then if you beat the game with every character, you could just go, and I think you hit like down on the character select screen at the very bottom of it, and then Gil would be selectable.
Yeah, and one of them he was below Alex, broken. And then the other one he was between Yun and Yang, something like that. But point is, you could play as him. Now I don't think you can in the 30th anniversary. I think they got rid of that, as far as I understand it.
I hope so.
But point is, Third Strike tournaments kind of came back, and in a very real way once this was hitting home consoles, and it had to be a matter-of-fact thing that Gil was not available because he would be a black hole on the character select screen. Everything would be about Gil. What do you remember about him being overpowered in this game?
He was ridiculous. See, you fill up your meters and then you would resurrect yourself.
Well, yeah.
And then like
tell them what that would look like, though, because I kind of wanted to save that for the end because of how ridiculously powerful he was. But you could beat him somehow. You beat him, and if the other person had a full bar of meter, he would just wake back up and get a full life bar. Now, I think you could interrupt that, right? If you were close enough, you could hit him before the life bar would go all the way up.
But he basically burst you back. It was like it was like doing a guard break or whatever, not guard break, but guard push, like in the Marvel games and stuff like that. And so you'd push back, and like you had to be in the right position. And then it's like Seraph Wing or whatever, like it would shoot a fireball on screen. It would do like, what was it, 50 or 30% chip damage? That's if you blocked it. If it hit you, it did like 70%.
Yes, his supers would lop off half or more of health bars.
So most of the people who played Go Online, and all of them sucked because screw them, but they would sit there and taunt for half the match because they were just playing a broken character. And
Did you see the footage that I recorded for this? I found some, and that's exactly what they would be doing, yes.
That's what you do. That's how you play a broken character. You taunt for half the matchup. So,
well, yeah, he had matter-of-fact amazing moves. Just think of like the damage output, the frame data, the lack of recovery, the speed at which he would move, crazy priority, could easily kill in single sequences, and again, could resurrect if you somehow managed to beat him through all of that. If he had a full life bar, hey, Dark Phoenix. The game becomes something that people don't ultimately want. Fun for a minute, sure. Take them through the arcade mode, bust them out and see if you can beat the best guy at the arcade or whatever it is. But when it comes to let's see who the best player is, this kind of ability with this kind of a character gets very much in the way of showcasing player skill. Something along those lines. So Gil equals no skill. All right, the third character is actually the .5. This is the half band, and a lot of people know about this one too. It is Old Sagat from Street Fighter 2. What do we mean by Old Sagat? Well, Sagat was actually the very first boss character in the franchise because he appeared as a non-playable final character in the arcade ladder of Street Fighter 1. That is not Old Sagat. That's really Old Sagat, and he's actually whatever. We don't care about him all that much in this context. Now, in Street Fighter 2, he appeared, and you couldn't play as him until Champion Edition, and then in the New Challengers. So Super Street Fighter 2, the New Challengers, when they welcomed in Fei Long and Cammy, that is the version of Sagat that that when we talk about old Sagat, we're referring to.
It's not a 1-to-1 port, but it's a very close approximation of it. Because even super version of Sagat, I don't think he had as fast a fireballs or as powerful of an uppercut. But for some reason, when Capcom put old Sagat into Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, they beefed him up even further. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But he most closely, you're right though, dead on. He most closely resembles the super version of the character.
Okay, yeah. And the way you would do that is in Super Turbo, you could select Sagat, and after you selected him, I think the official code is up, down, and then light punch. But regardless, you can just mash up and down and hit punch, and you'll get it. You'll hear him say Tiger, and you'll have the old version of him where he can't, tech throws, doesn't have a super meter, but he has an amazing DP that does a ton of damage, and he's got really, really effective Tiger shots. Beyond that, he's got a handful of normals that are very good at basically just playing this Street Fighter 2 101 fireballs uppercut zoning game. And as I read it, obviously that's really good, but that wasn't necessarily enough of a reason to ban him. There's a lot of really powerful stuff in Street Fighter 2. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, John, the reason he was banned was because there just were certain matchups where that was so oppressive and so effective that it basically deleted that character from the matchup. It became all but unwinnable.
It basically was considered dishonorable to play him.
Yep.
Because he had some 8-2, 7-3 matchups, and it was there are characters that with really lopsided matchups in that game. It's a Balrog, Dalsim, Vagar, the top characters in that one typically, and they had really lopsided matchups depending on who you were playing against. But Sagat just had so many of them. It was just sure, you could play him, but come on now,
yeah,
kind of thing.
So
John, who did you play in Super Turbo?
I actually played the other night with my friend, and I picked Sagat, who's my main, old Sagat, and he started whining about it immediately. You can't do that, he's banned. And I'm like, no, I'm doing research. He's soft banned, which... Okay, so Akuma and Gil that we talked about, they're hard bans. That's you're not allowed to play them. Everyone agrees. Soft ban means the players have decided of their own accord on the player side as opposed to the TO side of things that it's more honorable, like you said, to not do it because this is ultimately taking away from the game. And so it's not as egregious as our previous examples, but yeah, I have another David Serlin quote here. Says, he might not be as strong of a character as Balrog or Dalsim, but the problem is that there are several matchups where he just dominates. His Tiger shots are so powerful that many characters spend the entire game just trying to get around them, and that's it. So extremely repetitive, kind of predictable gameplay. Not predictable in you knew when he was going to throw him, but predictable in this is what we're going to get. This is not what we want to do when we sit down to play, to watch, and all that stuff. And so Sagat, soft banned in Japan, and your friend will still give you crap about it if you pick him, even in modern times.
Yes.
All right, this last one is the one that I think the fewest people will know about, but it is from Alpha 2. It's Evil Ryu. Now, Evil Ryu, like Akuma, was a hidden character in Alpha 2, like Akuma and ST, hidden character in Alpha 2, where you would you'd start on Ryu and you'd press right, up, down, left, and then you'd hold start and select Ryu, and his gi would turn black, and he would be Evil Ryu. His fireball turned into a purple one. I think he lost a little bit of his defensive stats, take a little more damage and stuff, but he gained things like the ability to combo Tatsu into DP and stuff like that. But I think he also got a Raging Demon, but it was laughably bad. It's you could jump out of it, and even if you did land it, there were better ways of using your meter than to try to go for Raging Demon. So Evil Ryu's Alpha 2 Raging Demon was not the issue. A big issue with his abilities in the game were that the VIA CC... you're familiar with the VIA CC. For those that aren't, CC does not stand for Crush Counter. It stands for Custom Combo. And you could, in Alpha 2, activate Custom Combo once you had enough meter. What this would do would send your character into a state where they could basically just run their hand over the joystick, and everything that you would do would combo. And that would only be for a few seconds, but it was a big deal. And when you activated it, if you were within about sweep range, the activation itself would cause a hit if the player wasn't blocking. And that hit would be enough of an opening that you could then go into your custom combo. So that essentially meant once you were close enough, and it's a single input, I think it was 2 punches and a kick, or maybe it's 2 kicks and a punches and they're interchangeable.
2 punches and a kick, yeah.
So a single input, if they weren't blocking, they got hit, and then they went into your hardest hitting combo. This is basically using V-trigger activation as a whiff punish. Think of it like that, okay? But you had to be next to him. Evil Ryu did not. Evil Ryu's blowback would affect the other character regardless of where they were on screen. So you could even be full screen and activate, and it would still hit them. Now, that didn't mean exactly as it's not as scary as it sounds, because he still had to capitalize on that and continue the combo. But what it did mean is he was more effective with the VIA CC, and it's called, I think, the VIA CC because VIA discovered it and was the one using it competitively.
VIA discovered it with Dan, and he saved it for tournament, like players did back in the day. I think it was against John Choi, and he busted it out, and Choi started using it back on him as soon as he saw it. But he actually discovered it playing arcade mode with Dan, and the custom combo was a joke, basically. It was a way of scoring, 10% of the opponent's life bar by spinning 3 bars, basically, completely, not worthwhile. But what would happen is he figured out that if you strung the right moves together, you could get massive damage from the custom combo. And of course, it was you could not react block to it. Calling it unblockable is not quite right. But basically, if you were standing, if you weren't crouch blocking, you could pop the CC and go right into a sweep. And it was you did not have time. The opponent did not have time to react block to it. And typically, the custom combo damage was about 30 to 40% of your life. Sometimes it was as much as 60.
So yes, Evil Ryu's blowback could happen anywhere on the screen. That's not why he was banned, though. The reason why he was banned was because he was only available in American arcades. He wasn't available across the globe, and so only Americans were playing with him at the time, and so he was agreed upon as to not be used in tournament, because similar to the likes of when, Mortal Kombat 9 released Kratos only on the PlayStation version. So other players couldn't practice with or use or get experience with the characters, and so they wouldn't be tournament viable. That was Evil Ryu's thing in Alpha 2, because as good as that sounds, he actually ultimately only was a mid-tier character. And it depends on the context of the game. What are other characters able to do? That sounds really good. Yes, it was really good, but it only ultimately made him a mid-tier, and that has all but become antiquated. Evil Ryu is now a viable character to play in Alpha 2 tournaments wherever they pop up, because the world has become a much smaller place. And like I said earlier, the issues of characters being overpowered, not really a thing anymore, because we have quick patches and stuff. And then the other main reason we see characters get banned like this is because they're not available across the board. Well, that's becoming much less of a thing too. So I don't foresee this being as much of an issue, in the future, but there it is. And there's the 3.5 characters that have been banned from Street Fighter tournaments over the years. There are others that have been, I think, what was it? Goken was imagined, or they wondered about banning him because he kind of fit the same bill as Gil and Akuma, right? He was the last character you unlocked.
Back throw.
And he's got that super cheap back throw. But yeah, he was the last character you would unlock. So it's he sounded like, oh, is he a boss god character? Spoilers, he was not. But these are the ones, and let us know in the comments, by the way, if you knew all of these already or if you learned something. And thanks so much for watching, and that's all I had to say about banned characters.